Welcome back to the Academy for the fourth debate. Today's debate is over the question, is anti-feminism good? And our debaters are Placeholder Films and Isu. Debating why we should hate the women's, kick them around, and tell them what to do more often is, of course, Placeholder. Placeholder, introduce yourself.
Hey, everybody. So I'm Placeholder. I'm the misogynist nerd that's arguing in favor of, keeping the whammons down and such. But in all seriousness, though.
Yeah, and of course, that's enough. Shut up, sit down. And of course, our white knight riding in on his shining horse to tell us all how great a guy he is in the hopes that he might possibly get to sit in the friend zone longer is Isu. Isu, stay
Hi, how you guys doing? I'm Issa. I'm the white knight, and I'm hoping that I'll get laid by being pro-feminist or anti-pro. Yeah.
Working behind the scenes, of course, tonight, as always, is Tim. Tim, say hi. Thank you, Tim. Anyway, tonight's debate will be as normal. We're going to go into our opening remarks with 4 minutes. We're going to start off with, I believe, Placeholder, and then we'll be going into... after opening remarks, we're going into rebuttals. Make sure if you have any questions and you're in the audience to place those in the side chat, and we'll get to those at the very end after closing statements. Anyway, tonight's debate opens up with Placeholder Films. Placeholder Films, tell us why you hate the whammons.
Okay, so I am just going to give like a real quick heads up. I'm not feeling very well today. I've got really bad allergies from all these storms going through, so I'm going to sound like shit the whole time. So bear with me. It's not so much that we should hate the whammons. I know we're all shit posting at the beginning and all, but what it really comes down to is whether or not we should allow one specific interest group to monopolize a conversation. So it should be pushback against especially the radical ends, but even the more moderate elements within the feminist movement should have to defend their ideas. So if they're not willing or able to defend their idea, how can they say that it is a good or reasonable idea? The anti-feminist push online is kind of, at least in my view, an important aspect to what a culture does when it tries to reform certain elements of itself. So in embracing essentially the quote-unquote anti-feminist side, it's not so much being against feminism, it's being against certain brands of feminism. So one of the things that we really should clear up before we continue in the debate is what are we talking about? When we say feminism, are we talking the feminism that says that men and women should be seen on equal footing? I don't think any reasonable person could be against that. Or are we talking about the feminism that says that, men are all patriarchal oppressors and wait, and that all sex is rape, basically like neo-Puritanism, essentially, in terms of its behavior and outcome. And I think that these are important foundational conversations that have to occur before we can even say, is feminism even good? So if Esau would like to respond to any of those, I would certainly be interested in hearing, a defense of those, essentially.
Does that conclude your opening statement?
Yeah.
Excellent. In halftime, Placeholder has started his opening statement using only 2 of the 4 minutes. Unfortunately, you don't get any bonus points for that. Isu,
all right.
No, hold on. This is entertainment, my friend.
Sorry,
you
man.
Can't just talk over the host.
I'm sorry, man. Bad habit. Bad force of habit.
Bad form, my friend. Bad form.
Sorry.
Anyway, Isu, please explain to us why we're all going to be Marxists within a few years.
All right. So I'm going to be honest with everyone. I am not a feminist for say. Actually, I'm not a feminist at all. But I am going to take the defense of not allowing and not being and being for pro-feminist ideas, I guess. And my argument would go towards this. There is a need for feminism still in the world, and I've always said this. I said that feminism is still needed in the world in parts of the world that are where women are treated and are oppressed, such as the Middle East, wherever the Muslim world is, most parts of Africa, parts of Asia, South America. So there is a need for feminism. I don't think I can totally understand the narrative that, you know, feminism is the main point, and if you go against it, you're seen as a bigot or a sexist or the patriarchy. But I do agree that they should have a better argument, and they should be willing to have those arguments. But we shouldn't want to shut them down. And I'm not saying that Placeholder wants to shut down these arguments, but I think we should be more, open to these ideas, such as MRAs and MGTOWs and all that stuff. We should be more open to these ideas and be more open-minded to them. So I do believe that, you know, there is a need for feminism, maybe not in the Western world, but I'm not against it, saying that it shouldn't be here. I think it should be here, like any idea should be here, but they should have a place to say what they want, and then we should be able to rebuttal it. So I do agree with Placeholder. There is a narrative that you're labeled things if you go against feminism. So that's kind of my open folly or whatever.
Excellent. And once I gain control over my mic, I can let you know that you had an extra 2.5 minutes there. I'm curious. Occasionally throughout the debate, I'll be asking questions. One of my first questions is for both of you. Have either of you prepared for this debate?
Yeah, sure.
Esau, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I prepared for it. I think it's more so I know the arguments, and I've heard these arguments several times, and I kind of know what people say, and you know, I've heard these debates multiple times, so I kind of know what to be prepared for.
All right, so let me remind our audience and our competitors of the question that brings us together today, which is anti-feminism good? Going into our rebuttal period, we're going to start off with Placeholder. Placeholder, answer the question, or ask the question, is anti-feminism good?
Okay, so is anti-feminism good? That on the surface, we can understand that, you know, it's asking a very simple value statement. The question, though, again, is kind of what I alluded to in my opening statement about the definition of terms and how specifically we're talking about things and in what context. Feminism is a good thing. Ultimately, it is a good thing. It leads for a more just, more fair society. And we see parts of the world that doesn't have feminism, that conditions are terrible and that everyone lives in squalor because half of the population is not being economically productive. If we look at the difference, though, between the third world and the first world, which is, you know, the economically poor and the profoundly povertous versus the immensely wealthy and better off, just simply by, you know, the actions of previous generations, feminism has proven to be good. Now we're getting to the point in our society, however, that there are beginning to be arguments in favor of superior rights, additional positive rights, rather than just negative rights. You know, I can't be discriminated against based on sex or based on race. You know, that's something that feminism contributed toward, that allows for people in our society to be treated fairly. And people in our society are treated pretty fairly. We could probably get to a point where it's more fair, but, you know, that's all relative to what you're actually looking for. If we were to talk about whether or not anti-feminism is inherently good, I don't think good and necessary should be considered the same. Anti-feminism can be good, but is ultimately necessary. Excuse me.
And do you have any questions for Isu in your next 2 minutes?
So I think that we should come to the consensus, Esau. When you're defending the idea of feminism, what specific aspects of feminism are you holding as good versus what aspects are you holding as, you know, desirable or unnecessary or undesirable? You know, like let's meet in the middle and understand what it is that we're talking about before we continue.
Can I go? All right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. There is kind of a supremacy out there. Now, what I'm talking about when it comes to is feminism. Once again, to me, feminism is a necessary for poor parts of the world, and it's still a good thing to have in the Western world. There's always going to be, no matter what, there's going to be people out there who don't want to hear about sexism and all that, but that does exist out there, and not everywhere, but you still need a level of equality. But where I think for feminism, I do agree that it does kind of spin off to something that more so than what you see today. They do want more. They do want more rights, even though they say they don't. But I think equal opportunities is what we need to be going after. Equal opportunities for the rest of the world. Like I like to think for the third world. That's kind of my whole thing. I mean, I look at the Middle Muslim world and I see how women are treated. It's not a good thing. So that's kind of where I think feminism needs a shift instead of staying in the Western world. So that's kind of my arguments. I don't once again, I don't see a complete point of it being here in the West, but I do see it as a necessary, not necessary, but as a good thing to have. So equal of opportunities in the West, which I think we're mostly there. And I think them, fighting against oppression in like the Muslim world or in parts of Africa, once again, or Asia is a necessary. So I do think feminists need to shift their focus towards those parts of the world.
Placeholder, do you have any responses or any further questions? You still have another 2 minutes worth of rebuttal time.
Well, okay. So I'm glad that you understand the distinction between feminism in parts of the world that don't have it and parts of the world that do. That's something that's really important that everybody understands is a core part of the conversation that has to occur. One thing though that I would like to further clarification on is in the West. Let's call it the West rather than the first word, because people and their feelings. But so in the West, feminism has essentially achieved its goals. Can it really be said that with all of the legal protections, all of the anti-discrimination laws, all of the positive discrimination laws, the affirmative action and such that has occurred for both race and feminism is necessary in the...
Did you catch that, Isu?
I kind of got where he was going. Once again, I don't think in the West that feminism is necessary. I think it is a good thing to have. I think
just what Placeholder, drop and come back real quick. You're roboting real bad. So go on, Isu.
All right. So once again, I don't think feminism in the West is necessary. I don't ever believe that one bit. But but because we live in a free, open society, I think it's a good thing to have. I think we do need levels of to keep things in check, and there are a lot of laws out there made for women and minorities and all that, and I'm not for one for any at all for what's the law made for if black kid is poor versus a white kid, what's it called, the law, like where he can go to the university over the white kid if he just simply because he's a minority.
I don't know that there's a law like that.
No, like where they
okay, sorry about that, guys.
Cool. But I still believe that feminism is good to have in the West. Once again, I don't think it's a necessary thing, but I think it's good for checks and balances out there. If they're not going crazy, and if they're not, being like these third wave feminists that we see, I still think it's a good thing to have. I think if they're level headed, I think it's good. But if they're not level headed, I do think it's a bad thing.
Okay, so if it's good to have in the West, it's already enshrined in law. Why do we need it to be? Why do we need a continuation of it? We already have the checks and balances enshrined in law. We don't need that advocacy group any longer.
Well, do you want to make laws against it? I mean, do you want the government to banish it?
Well, you can't. Okay, the government can't ban political ideologies.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I would be horrified if our government did that or even tried to. That's, partially why I think communists should be allowed and should be elected to United States, official positions. It doesn't mean that they should be able to, pursue that end successfully. It should be up to the people, and it should be representative.
Excellent. And that ends the rebuttal session for Placeholder. I'm going to go ahead and allow Isu to respond to that last point.
Okay. So once again, is there a need for feminism in the West? The I'll call Western culture. No, there isn't.
Isu, respond to his last point in the rebuttal, and then you'll get your rebuttal
What was
period.
his last point again? I was trying to go over.
You know what? We'll go ahead and we'll start your rebuttal period. Isu, you have 4 minutes.
Okay.
You can ask Placeholder anything. You can make any statements you'd like, and go.
All right. So essentially, you believe that there's no need for feminism in the West. So clearly, I don't think you're against them being allowed to have protests and have these groups out there to, I guess, fight whatever reasons they may think they're fighting for. I mean, you're clearly not against that. So I mean, I don't see what the problem is of these groups existing. If I understand that laws are already being made for equal rights and all that, but I still don't see why you're against the group existing. Like, I don't like BLM, but I'm still for it existing. If they want to protest and have arguments and all that, I don't have a problem with that.
Is that a question?
Yeah, that's a question. I'm saying why like, I mean, if you don't want to ban it, so I mean, so clearly you don't want to ban these groups. So, but what do you want to do with them? I mean, are you for them existing? Or are you for them just like completely going away?
I would like to see specific advocacy groups just disappear, as in like disband naturally as a result of their ideological concerns being addressed either affirmatively or negatively. Their arguments have essentially been debunked by just the statistics of, the labor force. Like the so-called wage gap is an earnings gap, and it's due to personal preference, and that's already been debunked, and yet they continue to drag it out and beat the dead horse. That scene from South Park comes to mind of that farmer beating a dead horse. We see the advocacy and of the restriction of rights of other people coming out of feminist groups, and in that regard, I don't think they should be allowed to exist. If you're advocating the removal of rights from people, you shouldn't be allowed to do that, because you are advocating essentially state-sanctioned violence against that person or that group of people based solely on the actions of others.
Isu, you have 3 minutes 3 minutes left.
Okay, cool. No, I totally agree. I think groups who advocate for silencing other groups should be banned. But I think overall, I once again, I agree, these groups will naturally go away on their own. But for the meantime, I think if they exist, we should, as we are now, we should debate them, and we should debate their arguments. And that's kind of my argument at the whole thing. So if they exist, we should argue against them, and I agree, in their own time they will go away. But as of right now, I do think feminism as a whole, like as a bigger picture, it still has a need out there in the world. And I think the biggest reason why it's needed in the West is because all the power and all the money and everything is here in the West. So these people are the ones who can fight and change what's going on in the other parts of the world. So that's kind of my bigger point. So people here can drive those arguments to change the parts of the world that we see like the way they are now.
See, it's interesting that you bring up money and power being concentrated in the West. So in the West, who actually controls that wealth and influence? It's certainly not men. So if women wanted this to occur, if women wanted to change the world, for the better in other parts of the world, they could certainly do so. Even through token gestures, they could certainly do so, just from the amount of money they control. Because all spending power in the West is controlled by women, or at least the vast majority of it. I think it's like 70% of monetary decisions are made by women in some form or fashion.
Isu, you still have 2 minutes if you
Awesome.
want to continue rebutting.
So I'll be honest, I have no idea if that's true or not, and I'll definitely do my research on the whole women control, the money aspects of it. But when I mean that in the West that we control the money and we have the powers, because the West is more, it's more civil. This is gonna suck to say, but it's more civilized, I would have to say. And because of that, we can make arguments. Like, it's our job to make arguments against them that help in some sort of way to change their mind so they can focus on the more important, dire things. And I agree that they should focus their money and their time towards those parts of the world. But I think if we're just against feminism as a whole and we want to see it banished or we want to see it dissolved, I think that isn't good for the rest of the world. And that's my focus. I get in the West that, we have it made and women have everything that they need here and they have the same equal opportunities and all that. But there's still a need for feminism if we want to, have the concerns for the rest of the world, right? There's still a need because they make those arguments and they should, I agree, shift their money and their time towards, once again, the Muslim world or wherever women are oppressed.
All right. Are you finished with your rebuttals? Do you have any further questions for Placeholder? You still have 50 seconds.
No, I think I'm good for now. Yeah.
All right. Placeholder, I'm going to give you the same opportunity to respond to his last point that I gave to him earlier. Would you like to respond?
Could you repeat the question?
I think it was a statement.
Can you repeat the statement? I'm sorry.
All right, I'll repeat it. So essentially what I'm saying is in the West, there's still a need for feminism because of the power, because of the money. And I don't know if women control all the money. That's something else I need to kind of look up on my own. So I don't know too much of that. You could be right. But there is still a need for it here in the West because our jobs as whoever, men or women, should debate these people and help change their minds, the people who have power, so they can shift their focus and their time towards the parts of the world where women are oppressed, where there isn't equal rights and equal opportunities and all that, right? If we want to see a change in the Muslim world, we should debate the people who have the power to help change it.
So
you don't have to respond if you don't want.
Sorry for the dead air, guys. I'm thinking, how would we go about and influence their decision making in such a way that is in line with what they perceive to be their interests? Unfortunately, one of the things that we see about like the personality types is people with high openness but low conscientiousness, unfortunately, tend to be women. Whereas if we have, high conscientiousness, which is duty, essentially, men are higher in that, as well as like being, work oriented. That's just how, evolutionarily speaking, we evolved. So to me, saying that, oh, well, I mean, we still need it in the third world or in the first world because of third world problems, doesn't really make much sense to me. I think that the people should, if they honestly can say that they care about it or that it is something that is important to them, they should be they essentially want to be treated like men. So they should behave like men in this regard. They see a problem, they should fix it. They shouldn't expect other people to fix it. They should directly influence it in such a way that it allows for that society to improve itself. So whether it's, going back to before the Ayatollah Khomeini took over, when Iran was still a pretty liberal country in the Middle East, where women weren't forced to wear, hijabs and niqabs and burqas, we would need to see that structural change from within, but you can influence that from without. So if women want to see that improvement, they have to be willing to go and actually do it. And they don't appear to be. They don't seem to have that same sense of duty that most men do.
All right. And that brings us to a section of the debate right before the close, where I'm going to ask our contestants each a couple of questions. Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Yes,
excellent. For Placeholder films, I have a question here. In the West, you argue that feminism is not necessarily necessary over the course of the night. And I have to make a statement that constant vigilance is the only way to maintain rights. So under this perception, is it really necessary to dissolve the institution of feminism once its goals have been reached, knowing that over time those goals can be dissolved just as quickly as feminism is if it's not constantly watched?
So, okay, if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's asking that once feminism's goals have been achieved, why should we have to disband it? And should they be allowed essentially to maintain those goals through their political activism? Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, that's a fair assessment.
Okay. I can understand that argument, and normally I would be pretty sympathetic to it. However, here's the thing. Once it's enshrined in law, there are so many more protections for that idea than would be, present in essentially the private sector. Like in terms of like the private marketplace of idea versus the public marketplace of idea. The private marketplace of idea would be like YouTube and stuff like that, but the public marketplace of idea would essentially be out in public and in terms of the government. Everybody has the ability, if they're a citizen, to influence the United States government legally. So if those principles are so important, then they should be, once it becomes enshrined into law, they should be then watching over it from a legalistic standpoint, which means that they go and get a degree and become a lawyer or something like that. The constant political activism is entirely unnecessary and serves only to hurt their position.
Excellent. And that brings us to my question for Ieyasu. Isu,
Yeah.
Asu, whatever.
Isa. Everyone's saying, man.
According to the scientific method, you make theories stronger by disproving them. Is it not the presence of antis necessary in order to make feminism's theories the best that they can be? And rather than opposing anti-feminism, why not embrace it?
Well, first off, I'm not against the idea of having anti-feminists at all. What I'm against is for them to wanting to shut down those ideas. No, I'm for embracing them and debating them and going against them and going against their arguments. I totally agree with it. The only way we learn is having debate. And that's kind of why I feel like we can change minds by having these debates, right? I mean, there are always going to be people who have strong ideas about something, but they might not be as knowledgeable as they like to think they are without having these debates and having a conversation. It's not like everyone is it's not like people don't change their minds. I mean, these debates and these conversations are good to have. So yes, I 100% believe in having these debates and having these conversations and being welcome to people who have opposing views. And I think that's good for feminism. If feminists, most of them or a lot of them, look at themselves and say, maybe, hey, we can change the way we think and focus on the more important things. So no, I am for embracing, ideas, but I'm even for embracing, I'm not just 100% for embracing ideas that I'm against or I'm for. I'm for embracing all ideas, obviously. So because I like to have my mind change and I like to learn things and I like to be open-minded.
Okay. One of the things that we need to understand when we're talking about
hold on, placeholder. That was a question for Asu. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I do have another one for you. And this one is for placeholder. Are antis, by definition, attempting to silence feminists? Earlier, you made the argument that feminists attempt to silence other people. Antis, by definition, oppose the idea that they are anti. Does that not mean that you are opposing opposition? That may sound like a really confusing question, but what I'm asking you essentially boils down to, is anti-feminism by definition hypocritical in saying that feminism wishes to silence people?
Okay. I don't believe that antis are being hypocritical in regards to their opposition to specific strains of feminism, radical feminism being specific within those strains. I think that it's necessary pushback. You can't just have a group of people advocating, additional rights for them and then the stripping of rights for another group based on actions that they didn't perpetrate. The thing that feminists in general, like in the conversation that we're talking about, more the more radical ones, not the, you know, the Lilly Ledbetters and, you know, like John F. Kennedy, who signed the Equal Pay Act in I think it was 1963. We're talking about the people who say fathers don't deserve rights, or that the father seeing the children involved in that marriage should be essentially overseen, or should be at the, you know, at the whim of the mother. That's a very dangerous proposition, and that winds up causing a lot of problems in our society, specifically a high rate of single mother parenthood. And that winds up breeding all sorts of crime, because you don't have the foundation there for a stable growing environment for the kids. They wind up going back and forth between, you know, parents' houses, and, you know, in most cases you wind up having one or both parents talking poorly about the other parent to the children, and that causes all kinds of problems. A specific problem that I think feminists really need to address is problems within the family courts. It's incontrovertible that, like in Great Britain, for example, the family courts are very heavily skewed in favor of the mother, even if it's not a rational position to take. And there are statistics available for that, and I can go and dig those out if need be. So is, like I said, it might not be good depending on your perspective on it, but it is certainly necessary. Feminism has had essentially run the roost for the last 30 or 40 years in the United States government. Like, you know, there are, like VAWA, for example, there's Violence Against Women Act, there's No Violence Against Children Act. That's a little bit more important to me. There isn't a Violence Against Men Act for parity's sake. You know, feminists argue that they want parity, except for when it comes to the law. They think that it should be parity in their favor rather than parity, period, which means that parity, by the way, is not parity like making fun of it. Parity is sameness. It is actual equality. You know, they both have the same in that regard in terms of legal rights. You wind up seeing it become lopsided when this ideology is allowed to run roughshod and isn't challenged. This is a necessary countervoice.
Excellent. And for Iesu, to close out our question and answer section, why should any idea or any theory have the right to freedom from criticism?
I think every idea should be criticized. I mean, every idea should be criticized. I never for one second believe that it shouldn't. I mean, every idea should be criticized simply for the fact ideas they form, they grow bigger, they die out, they get popular. And if an idea is wrong, or if it's a bad idea and then it isn't criticized, then how are we gonna see the flaws in it? So I'm for ideas being criticized. What I'm not for is saying ideas should be shut down, or because they're shutting us down, we must shut them down. I think there should be laws in place to somehow adjust these things so that doesn't happen. And once again, I can agree to some of the points with, how, men get shafted over and all that when it comes to parental care and all that. But I think there were laws made for women because at the time women weren't treated quite well. Women, men could beat their woman and no one could do anything about it. So that's good that these laws exist. We don't want to overdo it, with some laws where it's like women get special privileges over men and all that. But no, I'm not against in any way, shape, and form ideas not being criticized. I'm a firm believer that all ideas should be criticized. Even if we all agree onto them, they should all be criticized.
Excellent. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, missing my microphone controls. That brings us around to closing statements. At this point in the debate, we'd like the competitors to kind of wrap up the entirety of their argument in one wonderful, rousing speech that wins them as many points as humanly possible. No interruptions. And Placeholder, you have the floor. 4 minutes.
Okay. So throughout the discussion, we've discussed topics such as, is feminism necessary in the West? Is it necessary in other parts of the world? Is it good for the West? Is anti-feminism in itself inherently good or bad? I think that a part of goodness stems from necessity. And yes, feminism was necessary. We had problems where people were not able to get safe abortions, for example, and that wound up killing tons of people and the fetus / infant, depending on the age of the abortion. That was necessary to change, and we decided as a society that that should change, and in that way, feminism was right. We were at one point willing and able to discriminate against women in the workplace and treat them very poorly. And yes, we did do that as a society, but we don't, because we agreed that it was bad and we should stop. So we stopped doing that and enshrined it within the law that it was not appropriate to do those kinds of behaviors and treat people that specific way. In regards to, they're trying to censor us, so we should censor them. Once they get it enshrined into law, and in Canada, there are bills like C-16 that are driven purely by ideology and that are supported by intersectional feminists that look at everybody as not an individual, but as instead components of their identities. I think that's a problem and that needs to be stopped. But to say that those kinds of things should have no counterbalance, or that the counterbalance being offered isn't good enough, is unfortunately not something that we as a society have the time or strength at this point to allow. We should have the counterbalance. We should have the counter arguments and the discussion that will allow us to come to a more realistic understanding and reflection of reality. And we just currently don't have that. Sorry, allergies, guys. I hope you don't mind my sniffling into the mic. It comes down to whether or not, excuse me, sorry. It's not whether or not women should be oppressed or men should be allowed to dominate women. It should be whether or not we allow men to excel, and whether women should compete with men or be considered essentially a protected class. And in that way, anti-feminists say, no, they're individuals. They should be treated as such, and that they should be seen as individuals. So I think in that regard, anti-feminism certainly is necessary, and a key component of goodness is necessity. So I think that it can be argued successfully that anti-feminism is good for the West.
Excellent. And that brings us to the end of Placeholder's argument. At this point, Isu, why don't you wrap up your conclusions in one rousing speech and tell us why it's not okay to beat your wife?
Okay, so, and I've said this before, feminism in the West is a good thing. Is it a necessary thing? No, it isn't. We do live in a society today where women are treated equally. What I don't want to do is disband or see these movements broken up, because it is good that we have laws to protect women still. It's good because, once again, like you said yourself, Placeholder, women weren't treated all too well back then, in the 50s, 60s, whatever. So these laws should stay in place. I also agree that we shouldn't make laws that give them perks and privileges, right? If they want to be equal, they should just live a life just like a man and have the same struggles. But feminism is needed in the West to an extent to where it should, which I hope, and I hope it will one day, force issues in the other parts of the world where women are treated and where women are oppressed, where women are not treated like first-class citizens, are treated like second-class citizens. So I would hope that our conversations that we have and more conversations like these will change the minds of feminists to focus on those problems in the rest of the world. And we can, and I think it takes people from the West, because we are from a more civilized culture. We are from a more advanced culture. We can push these matters instead of just thinking narrow-minded or thinking of just what happens here in the West. We should focus our intention right now towards women around the world who are not treated correctly. And I think that is why feminism is needed to an extent, to go to that extent. So I don't want to see movements like them disbanded, and I don't want to silence them just the same way I don't want people who are against them silenced. So I think these debates, these conversations are always needed. I think all ideas should be criticized, and we should be happy that happens, just so we can see things being fixed and improving. So that's kind of my closing statement.
All right, excellent job, Asu. At this point, we're going to go ahead and bring Tim, the silent man of the hour, into the show. Tim, why don't you come in and tell us a little bit about the Academy and how these fine gentlemen did today?
Everybody did really well. It's kind of a difficult position when we have people arguing a point that they don't fully believe two weeks in a row. But the Academy debate show, we debate every Friday, and we typically debate around 7 to 10, and it's just a way to, actually have people debate and earn a little bit of money on the side. So everybody did really well tonight. Placeholder got some really classic points. Let's see. So it was kind of like taking a step back to the old days of anti-feminism, where you started to watch like Sargon videos and, saying the wage gap isn't real and all these kind of things. Esau's position was more feminism in the West is no good, but feminism, which to both of your guys' side, it's kind of a difficult position arguing why anti-feminism is good or bad, because it's not nearly as prominent as feminism, and so you almost have to take a position of feminism. So I'm just tallying up the votes, and Dolphin will talk just a little bit, and I will drop it in the side chat.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tim. That is our silent man of the hour, the host of the Academy. I'm sorry, not the host, but the manager of the Academy, Tim Huggins, also known as the Academy. We are here every Friday, and if you'd like to follow the Academy on Twitter, you can vote on our next subject for debate, and if you'd like to compete, feel free to contact us individually, contact us all together, follow the Academy, follow Tim, follow our all of our social media on all the normal social media sites and all the abnormal social media sites, and make sure that you let us know what you think, and eventually we might notice you exist. That does happen from time to time. Anyway, back to the debate. I think both of our debaters did very well, and I'd like to congratulate them on well-argued points and well-presented data. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself here, Placeholder? Give us a little background. Tell us where we can find you and what kind of stuff we can expect from you on the internet.
Sure. Unfortunately, I do have a YouTube channel. It's just not active right now. I'm a college student, so I'm focusing most of my time into my programming study. I'm learning C++, and it's just kicking my ass, but I'm doing well enough that I'm getting an A in the class. But I'm a full-time student, and then I'm also about to pick up a part-time job. So I would like to continue to make content on the YouTubes, because I do like doing that, but unfortunately I just don't have the time. I am on Twitter. I'm at _placeholder __, because that's the only one I could get. And my YouTube will be posted in the description. If you guys would like to go and subscribe and watch my old content, I might be able to continue making content in the future, but it'll be way in the future. I have a couple of videos that I would like to do, like one on Naked Ape, because Egg was kind enough to make a thumbnail for me for it, because I'm like retarded on Photoshop. So I would like to use that asset before much longer. But I also argue against bad apologetics. Like Dean Esme, for example, I've had a few run-ins with him, and he's creeping back into the scene for some reason. But basically, I'm a moderate liberal atheist who thinks that everyone should be seen as an individual and shouldn't be, persecuted for the actions of others if it had nothing to do with them. I don't believe in ancestral guilt. I don't believe in racial guilt. I don't believe in class-based guilt. I think that action should be based on the actor, not the patient.
Excellent. And since you are, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and announce the scores now. The winner with 78 points against Esau's 62. Thank you, Tim. What are you going to do with your wonderful $25 prize?
So I'm going to be like a greedy bastard, unlike all the other people who've been participating in this. I need money to get to and from school because sadly I don't have a car right now. So that's going to be like gas and probably lunch a couple of days. So.
All right. Well done. I hope you enjoy your food, you greedy heathen bastard. Esau, why don't you tell us a little bit about where we can find you, what to expect from you, and what you're going to do with no $25 that I'm sure you would have given to starving children in Africa.
I would have given a shit about starving children. Oh, yeah, I would definitely give a shit. Okay. So I have a YouTube channel called Braintrust, and essentially I run streams, and I don't really get political anymore. I don't find it fun to be political. I think sometimes I like to catch up on topics that, kind of annoy people. But typically, I will do, quote unquote, what you people would call blood sports, which I don't like to really consider myself doing that. I like doing streams. So if it's fun streams or if it's kind of like an interview type stream, I like to bring on YouTubers, other big YouTubers or any YouTuber and talk to them. Something that I find interesting of the week, I might bring them on and talk to them. My channel is called Braintrust. It's not too hard. Braintrust is pretty easy to spell out. My Twitter, I don't really give a shit if people follow me on Twitter. I don't really care about Twitter. I think I tweet like every 4 days. But if you want my Twitter, it's through my YouTube channel. And I try to bring people on, and I try to make things entertaining, and I try to have some conversation. Sometimes I'll bring people on like a friend and just talk about, whatever goes on to that day. So it's not like I'm trying to be a political driven YouTuber, but if things need to be touched on, I'll touch on it and talk about it. I overall, I don't really give a shit about YouTube. I'm a chef, so that's all I do YouTube for fun. So don't expect much from me outside of just whatever.
Excellent. So you won't have to be buying your food. You can cook it yourself.
Nope.
You see that? You see that, you heathen bastard?
I figured it all out.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, let's go ahead and Placeholder. Why don't you give us our final announcements of the night?
So one last thing, Lindsay Shepherd is my waifu. Praise Keck. Praise Keck.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are the Academy Debate Show. We're here every Friday night. Make sure to follow us on Twitter, all the normal social media, and all the abnormal social media. Find out when our debate show is going to be happening and have a say in what it's going to be about. The next topic will be up as soon as we can get it, and we hope to have the vote in by Monday. So make sure you vote over the weekend. We'll talk to you later. Have a nice weekend.
Thanks, guys.